Ronnie, I told you I'd find a way back to you again. Now, for about a year now, I've been hearing about this baddest woman on the planet. But the last time I came to your show, I dropped you right there. And even after that, you never came looking for me to prove that you're the baddest. So, Ronnie, I've come looking for you to prove you're not. And you've heard about this, but last night I won the Royal Rumble match. And unlike Seth Rollins, I don't need much time to think. I choose you. And at WrestleMania, I am going to break your mystique. I am going to take your title. And I am going to kick your ass in front of the whole world.
First off, how's your leg? Huh? Because unlike you, I want my opponent to be looking me in the eye and primed to fight. I don't just want to beat you. I want to beat the best version of Becky Lynch that has ever existed. And let's just be completely honest for 1 second, shall we? You, me, and everyone else here knows that I can re-break your face faster than you could say Nia Jax. In fact, you, me, and everyone else here knows that I have the ability to kill you with my bare hands without even breaking a sweat. And the only thing stopping me is my decision not to. You know what, Becky? I just realized that we are the same age. That means while you were training, I was main eventing in a sport that didn't even want women in it at all, let alone in the main event. And last year, while you were in the kickoff show for Wrestlemania, I stole the show in my debut. How long have you been the man, Becky? Because I've been a household name for a decade. You gotta learn something here, honey. Any ring I step into is mine. I own the ground under my feet, and I'm gonna own you at WrestleMania.
Follow the buzzer. Rest in peace. Woo! The best there is, the best there was, and the best ever will be. What you gonna do, brother? Hey, yo.
Can you see me now?
Strategy my Oklahoma ass.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Welcome to another episode of the JM Report. I'm your host, GoodOlJM, coming to you from CSP Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And we got a lot to get into. We got a lot to cover. Of course, starting off with this past weekend's Royal Rumble weekend, Access NXT Take Over Phoenix, and of course, the Royal Rumble event itself. Lots of, well, there were a few expected occurrences to take place. couple of surprises, but nothing mind-blowing, although there were a few in the respective Royal Rumble matches themselves of the men and women. But during the week itself, a few bombshells, if you will, were dropped on the WWE fans or the universe, whatever you want to call it. And quite understanding, too, as well. I mean, you just reach your boiling point or your brink of frustration, and you just got to make a choice. And not only for your benefit, but more than likely your family's benefit and for your longevity, because everything that happens now or what's happening now cannot last forever. And if you're not happy, you got to speak out and say, hey, I'm not happy. This is what I want to do. But I'll get into that. As mentioned, there was a lot to cover here. So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible and basically set it up and get to the point. And as far as to what happened this past weekend, we're going to start off with NXT TakeOver Phoenix. And right off the bat, I'm going to say all of the matches were amazing, as NXT always delivers. It's the first NXT TakeOver of the year, so we'll see how they'll compare to the rest for the rest of the year, I should say. And not bad. I mean, what a great start. We saw a couple of new fresh faces on the NXT TakeOver shows for the first time or in a long time. If you're Cassius Ohno, yes, I know he was part of the previous one, but really all of 10 seconds. And but he had a good match here. But let's go in order, shall we? As the War Raiders of Hanson and Rowe, they took on the Undisputed Era for the NXT Tag Team Championships of Kyle O'Reilly, I should say, and Roderick Strong. After hitting the fallout, we have new NXT Tag Team Champions in the War Raiders. Much deserved. It's about time. I'm not saying they should have been champions since day one, but they've been very dominant, very just running over people. And if it had to come down between this team and Heavy Machinery, I definitely would have gone for War Raiders, as they just really killed it on the scene once they arrived to NXT. I guess they had more plans for them down there, and I'm assuming seeing that Heavy Machinery was more of entertainment tag team, though they can still wrestle, don't get me wrong. And that's why I believe the decision was made between the two teams to be called up of the Heavy Machinery over War Raiders. But at least that goes to show, again, like I mentioned, that they have plans for War Raiders moving forward. Probably won't be called up anytime soon. I'll wait to year's end, or maybe between SummerSlam and Survivor Series. That's usually another best time for call-ups, but we'll find out. And speaking of Cassius Ohno, he had his match one-on-one with Matt Riddle. This was built to be the final conclusion of their story, so to speak. And due to submission by unanswered strikes, the referee called for the bell as Matt Riddle would defeat Cassius Ohno in a very physical match, but that wasn't the only one of the night. Johnny Gargano took on Ricochet for the NXT North American Championship, and I believe this was the longest match of the night, as these guys nearly went for half an hour, just about. And for the most part, I saw as Gargano really had no answer for a lot of Ricochet's offense until finally Gargano had to go to that dark place and even had to expose the concrete underneath the ring mats on the outside. And it took a brain buster on set exposed concrete, threw him back into the ring, and delivered a slingshot DDT for the pin, as Johnny Gargano is the new NXT North American champion. Much deserved if he wasn't going to get the NXT title itself, but Gargano, I mean, he's Mr. Wrestling. He, babyface, heel, whichever way he wants to be portrayed as, he's amazing, and well-deserved title win here at Phoenix TakeOver. Well, NXT TakeOver Phoenix, I should say. For the NXT Women's Championship, Shayna Baszler defended against Bianca Belair, and by technical submission via passing out, Baszler retained the title against Bianca. But this was another physical match. Of course, Bianca eventually used her hair whip, and really, wow, I mean, talk about the effects of being whipped with hair. Now, it could have been some of the well, I don't use them. I don't know what they're called, but basically the decorations in Bianca's hair that she had might have been the cause of it, but who's to say? But because of the result of being whipped in the abdomen, Shayna Baszler had this wicked cut across her abdomen, I believe on her right side. It didn't gush out or anything. It just cut her open, and you can see that the effects of being whipped with hair, if anyone's into that sort of stuff. Hey, I'm not judging. If that's your thing, more power to you. But I'm not looking forward to being whipped by hair or anything for that matter. But wow, that's quite amazing. But again, Baszler retains here the NXT Women's Championship. Now it's a question of who will be her next challenger leading to WrestleMania weekend for NXT TakeOver. NXT TakeOver New York, to be exact. And in the main event, we saw Tommaso Ciampa defend the NXT Championship against Aleister Black in another very physical match. Both men really complimented each other, had a lot of great chemistry in the ring as we saw before. But in the end, we see Tommaso Ciampa retain, defeating Aleister Black. And quite interesting ending here as Tommaso Ciampa was heading up the rampway and stopped on the stage to pose with the title. And all of a sudden, from behind, we see Johnny Gargano appear, stood side by side with Ciampa, and they both display their individual championships as they held them up in the air, and the fans went absolutely nuts. And there were fade chants of DIY. So possibly, maybe, I know they're teasing the hell out of it. I know Mrs. Wrestling does not want this to happen, storyline that is, but we'll see. I mean, is this their version of a possible maybe two-man power trip, and that eventually Gargano and Ciampa will team up for a common enemy, I guess, or a common bond, and maybe go after the NXT tag team titles? That's just me fantasy booking, as we all like to do. And I mean, they haven't done it in a long time. They sure as haven't done it in NXT, so why not? They haven't really had, obviously the closest faction was, maybe still is, Undisputed Era. They had all but the NXT title in their stable at one time. And it's possible, maybe if they want to keep it a 4-man or 4-person faction, I mean, the most they had up to was 5 in the past WWE and throughout the 90s in the Attitude Era. Who's to say you can't throw in a 5th member and have it be a woman to represent the factions of a female roster and go after the women's championship and do like what Evolution did eventually. When was that? 2003, 2004? All the belts, at least on Raw anyway, all the titles were held by Evolution, and it worked because all the heels were all the champions were heels, I should say, and it drove everybody nuts from the fans' point of view. Like, one of these guys going to drop the titles, and that's what works. That's what keeps the fans coming to see when the day will come, whether it's on Raw, SmackDown, or in this case, just our ordinary NXT television taping, and not at a takeover, where you can see these titles change hands and keep the storyline more interesting and investive. But that was your NXT TakeOver Phoenix review. Again, I definitely recommending. But there was quite a bit of an extra bonus that we did not get to see on the live feed, as it was shown only on social media, where after Ciampa and Gargano were posing, out came Velveteen Dream eventually, then Ricochet, and then Adam Cole, and then Aleister Black eventually made it up the rampway after his match with Ciampa, and all 6 guys were staring down at each other. Eventually a brawl broke out, started on stage as referees and agents tried to break it up, but it eventually lured into the gorilla position, and it took Big Papa Triple H to break it up. And this is when it was announced, for the first time ever in 20 years. Keep that in mind for those who weren't even born yet. I was around when this happened the first time, the only time, matter of fact. But this coming Sunday night, during the big game, you can't in some platforms you can't really say the actual name of the event because lawsuits and stuff. I'm not that big of a personality yet, so I'll avoid it. But during the big game, for the first time in 20 years, Halftime Heat returns, and only to be shown on social media accounts as in YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course on the WWE Network. As all 6 men mentioned will face off in a 6-man tag team match during the duration of the halftime show of the big game. So we're going to see Aleister Black, Ricochet, and Velveteen Dream. Interesting combination there, considering the history between Ricochet and Velveteen. They'll take on Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, and Adam Cole. Again, another interesting pairing there between Cole and Gargano and Ciampa. But if that does not leave the final branding on Gargano being a full-fledged heel, I don't know what is. But considering all the participants that are in this one match, this one 6-man tag team match, it should be what some people say a Donnybrook. Definitely, shit's going to go down, folks, during halftime heat. And you know what? I can't wait. It's unclear when exactly this match, if it was taking place or if this is going to be live. No, it was just announced during the kickoff show of the Royal Rumble, as they show footage of what took place backstage. And Shawn Michaels himself, who was a guest commentator or not a commentator, but he was part of the panel, and mentioned that he was still working at the Performance Center as one of the coaches, and mentioned that, oh yeah, by the way, Sunday night during the halftime show, where there is going to be a halftime heat 6-man tag team match. Of course, the last ones, for those who don't know, it was the empty arena match between The Rock and Mankind, led to a no contest, but the idea itself that not everyone that watches the big game wants to stick around and, review the game, the replays, the statistics, the numbers, and all that. They want to flip channels. And other times, people who, again, not fans of the football game, but they want to watch the new commercials that are debuting for the first time. And obviously, during the halftime show, there aren't any commercials. They can go anywhere from 10, 15, 20 minutes long. And during that time, we got to change channel, see what else is going on to pass the time. I remember MTV having Celebrity Deathmatch. I believe it was, oh my goodness. I think it was their version of Mike Tyson and, oh my goodness, the name escapes me. Oh, Evander Holyfield. And they had it, I think, at exactly 22 minutes and maybe 16 seconds, if I remember right. I mean, they had it from once the clock hit 0 to go to halftime at the game. If you jump to MTV right away, it immediately began. And once that ended and you go back to the game, they were probably halfway through the last commercial, and then they went back into the stadium. And good times. I don't know if halftime he would be that precise, but it'd be interesting to watch, and definitely worth covering next time here on the Jam Report. But let's get into the Royal Rumble event itself, as there was a kickoff show and there was a last-minute match announced as it kicked off the kickoff show in a tag team match as the Raw Tag Team Champions in a non-title match. Bobby Roode and Chad Gable took on Scott Dawson of the Revival and Rezar of the Authors of Pain with Drake Maverick. It was announced here, as many of you may not know, and I mentioned it here last time on the Jam Report, his tag team partner Akam unfortunately is injured and may be out for an unknown disclosed time. So, to compromise, if you will, if you want to have if you want to have a kickoff show and involve as many talent as possible, it won't be fair if it's just the Revival and Rezar still left off. So, I guess from a random coin toss or draw of straws, I don't know how Scott Dawson exactly was chosen from the Revival, but he teamed up with Rezar. And we see Drake Maverick coming out of the McMahon's office, and again compromising. So if Scott Dawson and Rezar were to win this match, both teams would eventually receive a tag team title shot in the future. They didn't, as Gable and Roode would win the match in less than 7 minutes. In the other kickoff show, we had for the United States Championship, Shinsuke Nakamura taking on Rusev. We see that Lana once again jumped on the apron to point out to the referee about Shinsuke Nakamura's tactics. This unfortunately would cost her, as Nakamura would counter Rusev's charge, and Rusev accidentally bumped into the ropes, knocking down Lana, and seemed to have tweaked her ankle on impact. this caused so much distraction and concern from Rusev that from behind, a Kinshasa to the back of Rusev's head, and Shinsuke would retain the United States title after the 3 count. But the concern here on Rusev's part anyway was Lana's injury as she was carried to the back. In a very entertaining fatal 4-way for the Cruiserweight Championship, Akira Tozawa, Hideo Itami, and Kalisto would take on champion Buddy Murphy, where Murphy would pin Itami to retain the Cruiserweight Championships in 12 minutes and 5 seconds. And I was hoping for one of the Japanese wrestlers to win, to be honest. I made that call last week, considering what we will find out later on in the week. I can kind of see why Hideo was the one chosen to take the fall, as it's custom and tradition, for lack of a better term. But yeah, Buddy Murphy retains the Cruiserweight title at the Royal Rumble kickoff show. And we get into the main event, well, the main portion of the show, I should say, of the Royal Rumble, as it started off with the SmackDown Women's Championship as Asuka defended against Becky Lynch. An incredible match here. But unfortunately, at the end, Becky Lynch would fall short as she is forced to tap out. Not to the Asuka lock, but it was a rendition, because they would exchange holds back and forth. Becky would counter the Asuka lock into her own version of the crossface chicken wing, but Asuka would escape. A couple of roll-up attempts. But it took Asuka to basically flip over and put more torque and pressure on Becky's shoulder and force her to tap out, and Asuka retained the SmackDown Women's title. There was also a story here that Becky also might have injured her leg as well during the match. And her story did not end there, Becky Lynch, that is, as won't be the last time we will hear of Becky Lynch. The Miz and Shane McMahon, or as many have affectionately come to call them, McMiz, took on the bar for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships of Cesaro and Sheamus. Great match here, much more entertaining than expected. And it took a shooting star press from Shane McMahon, one he hasn't done in a long time, and not many were successful, but he hit one on Cesaro after a mistaken bro kick from Sheamus that basically Miz caused. But it was a miscue there on the bar's part, and Shane will get the win, thus making Mac Miz, I should say, the winners and the new tag team champions on SmackDown. And of course, it was a giveaway. And I mentioned this before when Nia Jax won the women's title last year at WrestleMania. When you announce and show family members of the challengers for said championships, it's a dead giveaway. And they've done that more than once. I'm waiting for the day that they do it and they swerve everybody, oh, they didn't win, so unless the family themselves are going to be physically getting part of the storyline, then you shouldn't be showing them. If anything, it would have been, I believe, more emotional, at least more of an emotional impact, had they not shown the Miz's father at the beginning, and then later on, I believe they cut away to him maybe once or twice, and they win the match and they celebrate. Okay, great. That's a great moment. It's a great scene, a great visual. But again, I believe it would have been more impactful had they not shown, not even acknowledged the person or the members of the family. You win the match, you see mom and dad or brother and sister, cousins, whomever, and you just fly over there and you celebrate. Maybe you embrace, maybe you shed a couple of tears or so, but it's just getting predictable is what I'm trying to say. And whoever keeps calling this, tone it down. And yeah, there was a huge gap between last year's WrestleMania and this year's Royal Rumble. If anyone ever said, like, no one's going to remember that, guess what? A lot of us did. A lot of us did. So please quit insulting our intelligence. Not to mention that there is something called your very own network that people can go back to anytime and see this, pick up a pattern, or at least see something like, hey, they've done this here, and now they did it again there. And again, your excuse is it's a year apart. No. For the Raw Women's Championship, Ronda Rousey took on Sasha Banks, and it was very refreshing to see a new opponent for Ronda, as these two beat the shit out of each other. My goodness. And, of course, Sasha bumping around for Ronda towards the end of the match here. And it was a battle of the arm bars, if you will. And there were a lot of counters, counters, a lot of rollouts. And it just took Ronda to eventually catch Sasha Banks in the armbar. And it took a while as Sasha would fight it, but eventually caved into the pain and tapped out. Ronda would eventually try to help Sasha Banks up to her feet and didn't want to interact at first, but Ronda caught up with her on the outside of the ring, extended her hand, and shook Sasha Banks' hand. And Sasha, being defiant, stuck out her hand, her other hand, and gave the sign of 4 fingers. Now, there's a bit of a confusion here, or conflicting stories that the announcers indicated Sasha Banks indicated that she's a 4-time women's champion. Like, yeah. One has nothing to do with the other, folks. How many times do the familiar four horsemen symbol of the 4 fingers pop up, and the announcers would say, "Oh yeah, 4-time champion. That's right." Did we ever see Bret Hart do that? Did we ever see? Actually, we did. No, it wasn't Razor Ramon. It wasn't even Shawn Michaels. I think, did Jericho do something like that? But not like 4 horsemen style, but. He was indicating with sign language that he's a 4-time Intercontinental Champion when it happened. But I think maybe Miz might have done something like that as well. But no one ever pointed out that on those occasions that those individuals were part of a faction at one time, or wanted to be, or grew up watching them. We know Sasha Banks is a part of a backstage, if you will, or privately or personally group of 4 horsewomen of the WWE, others being Bayley, Becky, and Charlotte. There's no secret anymore. That's been out for a few years now. Ronda being part of the 4 horsewomen of the MMA. The other 3, of course, are down in NXT. And like many of you, we want to see this 8-women tag team match eventually. I think Survivor Series will be a best fitting, if not a SummerSlam, for those who are impatient. But again, I think the announcers are just insulting, or if they're being told on headset from backstage, like, "Oh, don't acknowledge the 4 horsewomen. Say that she's a 4-time champion." Sasha did it previously on the Go Home Show to Raw, and Becky as well will do it to. There was a little, I'll get to in my Raw review, but just real quick, if you miss it, because after her match on Raw, Ronda Rousey had a match with Becky Lynch. And again, blink if you missed it, but there was a 4 horsewomen signal between Becky and Bayley. It happened so fast. If you go back to it, you'll catch it or slow it down, if you will. Just as Becky was about to climb up the steps and step into the ring, you'll catch it. So it's everywhere. Becky nor barely a 4-time women's champion on any brand. So what's the excuse there? Or better yet, just don't acknowledge it at all. The less you say is better, or don't say anything at all. But we'll carry on more weight, because remember when they did this? That's what it meant back then. Little did we know it will lead to this. It's something like that, folks. Come on, think outside the box. And by folks, I mean creative. You're not being very creative, but I'm not going to get into that whole argument again, because I seem to find myself doing that every week as I adjust my microphone here. Ronda retains. Sasha fails to capture the Raw Women's Championship, but I'm sure she'll get another opportunity later on. Then we get into the 30 Women Royal Rumble. And if I can just go through the order of entrance and point out some of the unexpected names. As number 1 was Lacey Evans. This would make her televised main roster debut, as she's still jumping back and forth between Raw and SmackDown. Natalya, Mandy Rose, Liv Morgan, Mickie James, Ember Moon, who I'll cover a little bit later on, who apparently had an injury during the Royal Rumble. Billie Kay, Nikki Cross, everybody's favorite, came out. Peyton Royce, Tamina, also making her in-ring main roster debut, even if it was for one night, was Xia Li from NXT, Sarah Logan, Charlotte Flair, Kairi Sane, Maria Kanellis, despite, and I'll cover that later as well, despite rumors of her and her husband asking for a release from the company, appeared here at the Royal Rumble followed by Naomi, Candice LeRae making her main roster debut, Alicia Fox, Casey Cansaro making her in-ring main roster debut, along with Zelina Vega. I love the entrance by Zelina here, channeling her inner Vega, literally, if you will, from Street Fighter 2, followed by Ruby Riott, Dana Brooke, Io Shirai making her TV or televised main roster debut, followed by former NXT UK Women's Champion Rhea Ripley making her televised main roster in-ring debut, Sonya Deville, the return of Alexa Bliss, who received a huge ovation as she walked down the aisle, Bayley, and we get to number 29. That was supposed to be Lana. 28. Lana, as mentioned earlier, was injured during the kickoff show from her match. Well, not her match, but the match between Rusev and Shinsuke Nakamura for the United States title, after falling off the apron and tweaking her ankle. And she really sold this. I mean, she didn't even make it halfway down the aisle, which was basically one of the dugouts leading towards the mound there, if not maybe a little bit further out, because the aisleway wasn't a straight line. It was just slightly curved, I believe, to make it just as long as possible. But then there wasn't no Alamo Dome entrance, thankfully. And we will see officials and referees come to console Lana, as she was, like, every step she took, she cried more and more. She was in complete pain. All of a sudden, from behind in the shadows, we see Becky Lynch walk over. She's looking down at Lana, and eventually gets in Finley's, maybe not in his face, but confronts Finley and says, put me in the match. And all of a sudden, I guess we find out that Finley has a lot of booking powers here, as Becky continued to state her case, and Finley just was hesitant. You could see in his face, he wasn't sure if he'd be in trouble, if he'll do this, on and on and on. The fans are chanting, let her in, let her fight. And then with just swift motion, Finley basically showing Becky where the ring is, this caused a huge ovation. Becky Lynch music's hit, and Becky Lynch was a part of the women's Royal Rumble, just like that. Becky, by the way, would eventually sport a black eye after all this. They tried their best to cover it up with makeup the rest of the week, but yeah, she's not called the last kicker for any other reason, folks, because she loves to fight. She's, the Fighting Irish. The remaining participants were Nia Jax, followed by Carmella, who was number 30, winning her spot after her and R-Truth won the Mixed Match Challenge Season 2 earlier. Oh, not earlier in the year, but a few months ago, right before, or around Survivor Series, if memory serves me right. And it came down to Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch, two representatives of SmackDown. And I love how, well, first of all the names mentioned. And like everyone else who has reviewed the Royal Rumble so far. And I agree. I'm really happy to have seen that they did not rely on legends this time. It was all about the new faces. So it was all about making the new stars. And just like what they're doing with the 6 call-ups recently, they want you to be familiarized with these faces, which have been seen before, but not at this capacity, not at this level, such as the Royal Rumble, and in this case for the women. And a lot of fans, if not all, that were in attendance at Chase Field, but a large portion of the audience recognized who they were as they made their appearance and entrances. So kudos on WWE here to not rely on the old shtick that was always the go-to for Royal Rumbles. They could have done that maybe with one individual and have everyone else be the NXT call-ups for the night, which was great. And by the way, if you haven't seen it already, if you go to WWE's YouTube channel, they have the men and women's video of being called into the office or just being walked up to with a camera crew to let know the said individual, hey, by the way, if you weren't told yet, you're going to be in the Royal Rumble this Sunday. And the legit reactions are priceless, especially with the women. There were a few women that names I mentioned here who made their in-ring debut for the main roster. They literally broke down. It was Io Shirai and Kairi Sane who were called in the office at the same time, and they both broke down. And Zaya Lee as well got a little choked up there. So real cool, and I like the way the old Prince Albert laid it out for them. It's like, yeah, you're representing your country, you're representing NXT. You go out there and do your thing, and Serena as well there. I guess to console in case if anyone really lost it, but it was cute how I think it was Xia Li who thought that she was in trouble being called into the office of Big Bloom. But it's a few minutes long. If you get a chance, check it out. I thought it was a nice touch to see what happened as how these individuals got there, or how they were informed, I should say, how they were going to participate in the Royal Rumble. So it came down to Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch, and probably one of the longest Royal Rumble matches ever between men and women's. But this definitely makes the longest women's Royal Rumble at 1 hour and 12 minutes. Unbelievable. And I believe the longest record so far goes to Natalya, who was in the ring for about 55 minutes, I believe it was announced. Quite a feat for a record that probably won't be broken for another year or so, because records got to be broken every year. But I say let this stand us out there for a few years, and give it to someone else. The current record holder back in the day, it was between Rick Martel and Greg Valentine, and of course they really made a big deal out of it. And then it was Rey Mysterio and the other guy we can't talk about. So quite a feat here. 55 minutes for Natalya. Kudos to her. But Becky Lynch was the one, of course, if you heard at the top of the hour, so there's no point in me keeping a secret here. But Becky Lynch would eventually eliminate Charlotte Flair, win the Women's Royal Rumble, and will go on to face the Women's Champion at WrestleMania. Question now is, will they main event WrestleMania? For the WWE Championship, we saw Daniel Bryan defend against AJ Styles. It was a great physical match. I even call it like a Japanese-style match here. Unfortunately, the crowd was so dead on this match. I think they were just still coming off the high of the Women's Royal Rumble. And it was really difficult because they still had yet another title match after this and another Royal Rumble match to get through. So, again, really difficult. I don't blame the fans for this, but unfortunately, this match suffered from it. But I thought it was a very good match, and a quite twist, I guess we can call it, of Eric Rowan, of all people, just all of a sudden walked down the aisle and stood at ringside for a little bit. There was a ref bump. In comes Rowan, and it wasn't a choke slam. It was a claw around the face of AJ Styles and delivered a choke slam style maneuver. But again, it was more of a claw. But anyway, it was more than enough for Daniel Bryan to crawl over and get the pin and retain the WWE Championship. So the feud is essentially over, but not quite. But I'll get into that during the SmackDown review. We then see Brock Lesnar defend his Universal Championship against Finn Balor. Finn Balor here got a huge ovation as everyone was hoping to see that he would win the title. And no demon, as he promised on a recent interview with ESPN, that he will not come out as the Demon Balor. But a great match here, of course. Balor was bumping around with suplexes delivered from Lesnar. Eventually, Balor would fight back, fight through Lesnar's offense, hit with the coup de grace. Gets the pin, but Lesnar kicks out and immediately slaps on the Kimura lock, and he really cinched up there, Lesnar did, and Balor eventually tapped out, and Lesnar retained the championship, but not before leaving. He would deliver a couple of more German suplexes and an F5 for a good effort as Lesnar left Balor laid out. Great match, though. Unfortunately, it was under 10 minutes, and that was that. We get the men's Royal Rumble match. 30 men fighting for the main event spot at WrestleMania. At least main event men's position. But again, the last match is the main event. So running down the order of entries. Elias drew number 1 because, of course, he needed time to perform and not kill more time in the pay-per-view because we were approaching midnight at this point on the East Coast. And they had an entire Royal Rumble match to get through. The Rumble match was just under 1 hour, I believe, at 57 minutes, but still, it was just crazy. Number 2 was Jeff Jarrett, Hall of Famer, making a surprising entrance. As he walked down the aisle, had a few exchanging words, and was believed to be a concert between the two, but Elias would just break a guitar across Jarrett's back. And the bell rang at that point, kicking off the Rumble officially. And shortly after, Jarrett was thrown and eliminated by Elias. Number 3 was Shinsuke Nakamura. Surprisingly, that he even returned to the arena. And at this point, I was gonna get upset. I hate seeing individuals that already performed earlier in the night, and here they are again performing later on in the Royal Rumble at a Royal Rumble event. And they've done that a lot throughout the 90s. And like, we've seen this guy already kind of attitude I had. And I know I wasn't the only one, because I always thought that would take away from others that could have been. I don't care if this was Barry Horowitz, make him a surprise return, but it's a spot that was given to someone else, not just someone who just had a match for a title nonetheless. And here he is again. But what a year has made for Shinsuke Nakamura's career. Of course, we know he won last year's Royal Rumble, went on to main event WrestleMania, didn't win the title, but here he was on a kickoff show. So I guess maybe the argument here was, yeah, he won the Rumble last year. I mean, we had him on a kickoff show. And we know not everyone's too fond, at least the fans are not too fond of seeing the favorites on the kickoff show of all things. And the arena's barely half empty or full. So let's just, throw Nakamura back out there. So if that was the argument, okay, I'll retract my statements. But otherwise, repeating superstars that have been seen already, yeah, tone that shit down. Kurt Angle was number 4, as many didn't expect him to appear, but yeah, here he was, but didn't last too long. It's just almost instantly tossed out. We get Big E, followed by Johnny Gargano making his in-ring main roster debut. Jinder Mahal, Samoa Joe finally in the Royal Rumble. Kurt Hawkins, Seth Rollins, Titus O'Neil, who avoided sliding the world slide again and just stopped short. Of course, at this point, Kurt Hawkins hid under the ring for the most part, and these two chased each other under the ring. Gets back in the ring. Kurt Hawkins does first, followed by Titus. They get to the opposite side, and Titus is immediately thrown out, and he just got out there. He lasted all but less than a minute in his appearance in the Royal Rumble, so thanks for coming. Followed by Kofi Kingston, Mustafa Ali, Dean Ambrose, No Way Jose, who I guess now is part of the Bushwhacker Luke and Santino Marella club. As he danced in, he gets tossed out and dances his way back with his entourage, only to be, I guess the word would be, intercepted by the next participant of Drew McIntyre, and he gets the crap beaten out of him by McIntyre and some members of the, I guess, No Way Jose conga line, and McIntyre eventually makes his way to the ring. We see Xavier Woods, followed by UK NXT champion Pete Dunne, who got a huge ovation. Andrade, not Cien Almas. Apollo Crews, bit of a surprise for me anyway. Aleister Black made an appearance at the Royal Rumble, followed by Shelton Benjamin, where the hell he's been. Baron Corbin, Jeff Hardy, who was running down holding his abdomen already. I'm like, did he slip on a banana peel backstage? Why was he running down injured already? Rey Mysterio, Intercontinental Champion Bobby Lashley, who didn't last long. Braun Strowman as the replacement for John Cena. Dolph Ziggler, Randy Orton, and eventually number 30, R-Truth. But as R-Truth was rapping his way down, well, not all the way down, but he barely got a few steps out of the dugout, he was attacked by Nia Jax, of all people. He got beaten down and apparently severely and literally injured that night, R-Truth, when Nia threw him against the LED boards there and then into the barricade. There was some bumps and bruises on R-Truth's face and torso area. And the story is, according to What Culture, that there was backstage heat for this on Nia Jax, as she's not severely but injured R-Truth enough where he complained and really had a temper tantrum in the back and complained to management about this. And Nia Jax was in hot water for a little while. This is not the level of Charlotte Flair injuries or most recently Becky Lynch face breaker. But I'm a huge Nia Jax fan. Let's just get off that clear. And a huge supporter. especially during last year's WrestleMania storyline leading up to a match with Alexa Bliss for the title about, being bullied and fat shaming and all that. I thought it was a very well put together storyline, but even back then, around that time period, unfortunately, she was caught up in miscues and others are getting hurt. Bailey and Sasha, among others. So there's a pattern here, unfortunately, and according to World Culture, I think they did it by the numbers, and like every 40 matches that Nia Jax is in, someone gets hurt severely. So let's keep that in mind. But Nia Jax enters the Royal Rumble, and she's out there beating down on Rey Mysterio, on Randy Orton, on Andrade, and eventually the men who were hesitant to touch a woman, let alone get physical with one, had enough, and they hit all the finishing moves. Rey Mysterio get the 619. Randy Orton hit his RKO and tossed out Nia Jax. Oh, thanks for coming. So eventually they're trying to test the waters again with men and women squaring off. They were kind of doing that with the Mixed Match Challenge, but they made it clear throughout that only the men can wrestle the men and women can wrestle the women. So is there a plan in the works where Nia Jax is going to wrestle a man? Maybe not at Mania, but maybe at Fastlane, because Nia Jax is booked already for Elimination Chamber, which I get into as well. So a lot of what ifs here, but not everyone's that interested, considering they will always fall back to Nia Jax's track record of hurting people. And the bigger question is why? Why men, basically intergender matches that have been very popular in Lucha Underground and in other places on the independent circuit. For WWE to do this again, they have a lot of sponsors they got to live up to. So unless they properly explain this, besides saying it's entertainment, we promise no one get hurt. But, Golden Crisp was one of the sponsors for the Royal Rumble. So who knows how they would have reacted, or maybe not, because they haven't gotten word of it, if a woman injured a man physically, even though it's part of the show or whatnot, but it happens. It's just a lot of explaining. It's a lot of taboo here. Golden Crisp spokespersons or whomever's in charge of that partnership there may not understand. So they got to explain a lot. And I mean a lot of details as far as the kayfabe side of things and the entertainment side of things and the wrestling side of things. It's just, it can be complicated. And, I've been watching for a long time, and I'll admit I don't understand and get everything as far as the psychology behind it and some ideas that has nothing to do with common sense or bringing logic into an illogical manner. Yeah, that's when you just lose everything. So hopefully things will just work out in the end. And if that's the plan for men versus women eventually, then we'll be safer and the proper precautions will be taken. So for the Royal Rumble match itself, it came down to two possible winners. Both men representing Raw, Braun Strowman and Rollins. And I liked here that they teased like, well, we narrowed it down to two of the possible obvious winners. And even though it wasn't acknowledged, but they clearly were repeating the Royal Rumble where, what was it, 2004, I believe, came down to Big Show and the guy we can't talk about. Almost down to the T, except Strowman was caught up on the ropes and was trying to stand up, and both men were already on the outside, standing on the apron. Rollins comes across from the other side and delivers the curb stomp on the apron, knocking over Strowman onto the floor, thus announcing Seth Rollins as the winner for the first time ever of the Royal Rumble, and he will make his choice to which champion he'll face at WrestleMania. So one Raw winner, one SmackDown winner. That way, both sides, I guess now, especially with the Women's Royal Rumble, they could easily book 50-50, I guess. Made sense, even though last year, they did, because eventually there were a couple of switch arounds, as Asuka was the Raw Women's representative, and she won the Royal Rumble, and Shinsuke was on SmackDown, and he chose AJ Styles for Mania. And that was your 2019 Royal Rumble. Overall, I thought it was a great show. I could have done without the 40 men commentators for the men's Royal Rumble, as they did nothing but argue and plug ridiculous, not so funny jokes back and forth. But I'm fortunate to have options to listen to it in a different language. So there you go. But I would say the commentators for the SmackDown, or not the SmackDown, for the Women's Royal Rumble match was much better. Of course, this leads to aftermaths. After the Rumble, we have Raw and SmackDown, but let's get to Raw first. As Seth Rollins comes down and points to the WrestleMania sign that was not available at Chase Field, thankfully, but they did display it on one of the bigger jumbotrons that they had at Chase Field. So Rollins still has something to point at during his Royal Rumble celebration. And out comes Triple H and says that Seth needs to make a decision tonight, as Brock Lesnar and Daniel Bryan were in the arena. And to keep in mind, to us, for the fans, not that Triple H has said that, I'm saying this, keep in mind, we have 2 months before WrestleMania. We still got the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view and Fastlane to get through. And who's to say Lesnar would appear at these 2 pay-per-views at all? Yeah, sure, he's done great balls of fire, but 2 back-to-back pay-per-views, and the next one is just in a couple of weeks. We'll find out. Then we get Dean Ambrose, who comes out and tells Triple H that he wants to face Seth Rollins, but Triple H was not interested. As he began to walk away, Ambrose will cut him off at the pass and say, "What's wrong? Do you need to ask your father-in-law first?" And the crowd chants, "Yes, he does." I love that. Arizona was killing here with the chants this week. Shout out to Arizona. And then Triple H, of course, with the pissed off look on his face, would then say, "Get me a referee," and start the match. And after we come back from commercial break, we have a match between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. Not knowing then what we know now about Ambrose, maybe a bearing of the hatchet between the two would have sufficed, as Rollins would win via curb stomp. And this is after Dean pointed out during his promo that Seth never beat him fair and square, one-on-one. But we didn't get that. And I think maybe not an embrace, but a handshake, a show of respect kind of thing, because there were talks during this day, which I'll cover in a little while, about Dean Ambrose and his future with the company. Instead, we get Nia Jax and Tamina coming down to the ring while Ambrose is still sitting there after his match with Seth Rollins. Nia and Dean go face to face. He then turns his attention to Tamina, and this is where Nia Jax attacked him from behind and taunts Dean to fighting her. But Dean just walks away as some officials and referees come down and break it up. So again, possibly pushing the envelope here for men versus women eventually down the line. Who knows? But Tamina and Nia Jax were already in the ring to kick off the qualifying matches for the Women's Tag Team Championships that will be determined in a Elimination Chamber match at the pay-per-view. Tamina and Nia Jax took on and defeated Alexa Bliss and Mickie James, as Nia Jax dropped the Bliss and James with a double Samoan drop for the pin. And Tamina and Nia qualify as being the first team here. No surprise here, as for the past few months we have been seeing duo women's groups, I guess, groups of 2 women side by side. And curious that Alexa Bliss was part of the first team to be eliminated. I guess have other plans for her, I would assume, and making her one of the first women's tag team champions in the past 30 years or so. We're not part of them, but still, at least keeping with continuity, I guess, by teaming her up again with Mickie James, as they were a bit of a heel faction before Alexa went down with her concussion. But yeah, kudos for that. We see Baron Corbin defeat Kurt Angle, as Corbin pinned Angle after dropping him with his Deep Six, a signature move, not his finishing move. That was quite interesting. But after the match, Corbin would hop up again back into the ring and lay out Angle once and for all with the End of Days. Finn Balor comes out and cuts a promo on Brock Lesnar, saying that Lesnar finally believed in him after the match. That's why he attacked Finn. And then we get interrupted by Lio Rush and Intercontinental Champion Bobby Lashley, as Rush says that Lashley is bigger, stronger, and faster than Lesnar. If Rush kept going here, we would have gotten a $6 Million Man reference. But Balor mocks Lashley's performance at the Royal Rumble, who didn't last too long. And then Finn gets beaten up and laid out by Lashley, as it looks like we're going to get a program between Balor and Lashley for the Intercontinental title real soon, if not this coming week on Raw. And I dig that. Balor basically going from one MMA fighter to another who is about the same size, but I think Lio Rush's dig there at Lashley being bigger than Lesnar now. Might have been a shot at his USADA testing. Who knows? That's just me speculating, but it is what it is. Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins team up for the first time on television in many, many years as they took on the Revival, as Hawkins goes down via Shattered Machine and gets yet another loss added to his record. After the match, Hawkins seemed very upset, and I don't think so, but I hope they don't break up the team right away as they just got together. But after losing as a team in so many years, but the story is that Hawkins is tired of losing, and he wants to get a win under his belt, even if it's not a one-on-one match, but at least a tag team match. Probably why, again, storyline was the plan to team up with Zack Ryder again and maybe help him out with that in that category. As promised, we did see Daniel Bryan backstage walking around with Eric Rowan, and they were just chit-chatting, nothing more, and we didn't see much of Daniel Bryan really after that, but Elias was in the ring and asking who wants to walk with Elias. Was about to cut a concert right there and there. And all of a sudden, Jeff Jarrett once again comes down, and I'll cover his story in a little bit as well. There's a lot to cover here today. Comes out calling Elias a slapnut. I see a t-shirt coming soon. And followed by the other Double J, Jesse James, or as many of us have come to know him as Road Dogg, as they both began to sing With My Baby Tonight. Both men started walking around the ring, looking for fans to sing along with. And then Elias would hop out of the ring and hit Road Dogg from behind with a guitar. He gets back into the ring. Elias does, has a fight with Jeff Jarrett. Jarrett would hold his ground, but eventually Elias would overcome him with shots as he is a little bit taller than him. And Elias reaches for another guitar and nails Jeff Jarrett across the back with it, leaving both Double J's laid out. We get Mojo Rawley yelling at himself in a mirror. I guess this is to remind us that he's in WWE still. Most likely another heel turn again, if he wasn't already the last time we saw him. But so much for that push after winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal a few years ago. Yeah, good job there. In the second qualifying match for the Women's Tag Team Championship Elimination match for Elimination Chamber, we see Natalya teaming up with Dana Brooke, filling in for Ember Moon, who I mentioned was injured. And again, I'll get on her in a little bit. Taking on Liv Morgan and Sarah Rogan of the Riot Squad with Ruby Riott ringside. And there was a miscue, and this allowed Brooke to be pinned by Liv Morgan to advance into the tournament. The less said about this match, the better. I don't know. It didn't seem like any progress will be going on between Natalya and Dana Brooke here. It's just unfortunate that Ember Moon had to be injured, and who knows what would have been the result of this match had she not been. And as we heard at the top of the show, the promos cut back and forth between Becky and Ronda, but right before that happened, Ronda comes out and issues an open challenge for the women's title for anyone on the roster, and she was just being booed throughout her promo. Ronda was. I mean, she was drowned, and at one point even pointed out that Ronda actually, stuttered or fumbled over her own words, like I sometimes do here on this show. And she pointed that out. I was like, okay, you got me to do that. Okay. Because Ronda gets really emotional out there. And you can tell when she's smiling so much and when she gets really upset, she's just trying to get into that moment there. As you felt and saw the tension in the air of something was going to happen. But this is when Bayley comes out and accepts the challenge from Ronda Rousey for the title. Bayley will unfortunately tap out to the armbar, and Ronda will retain. Then we get the Becky Lynch music hitting, and as we heard at the top of this program, and she wasted no time in saying in a Pokemon voice, "I choose you." This gets a huge pop, and no contact here, which I like. You don't want to have these two brawl at it, as there's going to be a battle of words from now. I wonder how much more jumping back and forth Becky Lynch would do between the shows. Maybe the build-up, or during the build-up, Ronda can show up on SmackDown soon. Again, there's 2 months between now and WrestleMania. And yes, we still got 2 other pay-per-views to get to, but if the focus is going to be WrestleMania and these 2 in particular, there's a lot of time to kill here. And still the build-up, for example, the build-up between The Rock and Cena was over a year, twice. I am looking at you, creative, to see if you can pull that off, assuming they were the same team. I doubt it, but the same creative team back then as it is now, to keep us interested. But the build-up is there, the chemistry is there, the tension is there. Now it's just a matter of not to overdo it and to stretch it out enough where by the time we do get to WrestleMania at MetLife Stadium, then yes, just bring it. About time. Let these two, rip each other's head off. In the main event match, we get Braun Strowman taking on Drew McIntyre. Okay, a battle of the big men. Oh, okay. At first I dug this, but these last two segments that I just mentioned should have been switched around. That's just my thought, but there was still yet another segment to go after this match. So either way, as far as the better reaction from the crowd, I think the Becky Lynch and Ronda segment should have been switched with the very last segment on Raw that ended the show, but I'll get to that. But the match between Strowman and McIntyre, nothing special here, and it didn't really last too long. As in this match, we find out that, or actually right before the match, we get confirmation that Braun Strowman is once again a babyface. As right before he walked out to the arena, he stopped by Seth Rollins' position backstage and shook his hand, as they were both men, the last man standing in the Royal Rumble match before Rollins eventually won. And this was a sign of Strowman showing respect to Seth Rollins. The match itself, again, wasn't much to it as Baron Corbin returned, and he and Drew McIntyre attacked Strowman and even double choke slammed him onto the ring steps on the outside and just left them laying. I mean, they're basically wasting, if it's the idea of all the big men facing off in each other, well, you're wasting them all in this one storyline here. You got Strowman, you got McIntyre. I guess McIntyre was never meant to go beyond a certain point, but he's already being brushed off to the side as all the focus is on Rollins. And I get, you don't want to get another heel versus heel title match at a Mania especially. We tried that, or they were about to try that at WrestleMania 30, and look what happened. And, and the Intercontinental Championship scene is kind of occupied at this time. So stick with these two men who are eventually going to get a Universal title picture at some point. But I'm just curious to see what exactly motivated these changes is all. McIntyre was there. And after getting away from the Dolph Ziggler feud and eventually the three-man team of Ziggler, McIntyre, and ironically Strowman, he got away from that. And here they were facing each other off in the main event spot on Raw. And now you're throwing back in the third wheel, this being Baron Corbin. And I get that Corbin is one of the best heels to be hated right now, so that's why he's getting all this attention, folks. Let's face it. McIntyre, not as much, but he's just more admired and respected as a heel, and the fans can get behind him, similar to how Stone Cold Steve Austin was back in '96 when he won the King of the Ring. He was heel throughout that, but his mannerisms, his in-ring tactics, and all of that, similar to what McIntyre is doing now, minus the middle fingers and, opening cans of whip ass and all that. But point being a heel, and the fans recognize that, this guy's come from a long way. He's returned to the WWE. He deserves a break. Maybe it's on hold for now. And the final segment of Raw was Lesnar and Paul Heyman coming out as they wanted to know what was Seth Rollins' choice. And Rollins himself would come out and literally get in Lesnar's face. And nothing was said here other than a brawl breaking out. Lesnar would deliver numerous F5s after countering the curb stomp from Rollins. He would leave and come back to deliver a few more just as Raw went off the air. And we would not hear about this until a few hours later and on social media the next morning that it was official. Seth Rollins will take on Brock Lesnar for the Universal title at WrestleMania 35. Interesting, there wasn't a verbal mention of this, at least not on Raw, not one that I can remember. But the power of social media, get the word out there. These two will have a match at Mania for the title. Okay, well now we found out basically in the course of one night, both Royal Rumble winners chose their titles that they want to chase after for Mania. I think the Becky Lynch Ronda Rousey one is more interesting and intriguing. I don't know what the hell they're going to do to keep us interested in Rollins and Lesnar. There are 2 pay-per-views between now and then. They can do yet another swerve. Not a swerve. Not swerve for the sake of swerving, but because it's expected by the time March comes around, Lesnar will be cleared and good to return to UFC. And almost around the same time, Dana White wants Lesnar to be back on UFC pay-per-view as soon as possible, as soon as he's cleared. We're still waiting on the USADA results. And as Dana White pointed out, that Lesnar will be involved in a title picture for the heavyweight title in the UFC. And we'll just wait and see how that goes. So maybe, and they did this before almost. The last time Lesnar left for UFC, but he wasn't any kind of WWE champion at the time. And there was some conflicting reports of McMahon wanting to avoid this, where Lesnar is under a WWE contract and as a champion, they don't want him to appear on UFC television with his title belt. So logic is to take it off of him to avoid it. Even though the visual will be amazing and you'll get a WWE title on basically your not competitor's TV show or pay-per-view. Great exposure there, but I guess you want to avoid lawsuits or stuff. But who knows what the thinking is, because this man, Vince McMahon, that is, he can change his mind literally 1 second to the other. But we'll never know for sure. Personally, I think it'll be a great visual if things work out between now and Mania and whenever Lesnar re-debuts in UFC. And if he's still Universal Champion, have him come out with the Universal title. If the stars align, have him win the UFC title. He holds both belts, and he will probably be the only person ever in history to do that. And imagine the endorsements this man will get. It's all about money when it comes down to it. And as Brock Lesnar, it's all about money. Hence the kind of deal he has with WWE, and hence the one he's going to eventually have with UFC. So again, between now and then, we have 2 pay-per-views. We may see Lesnar drop it at the Chamber event. We may see Lesnar drop it at Fastlane. Who knows? That's just the magic of WWE, because you don't know. And as much as you're pissed off, we all still tune in to see what's going to happen next. And a lot of us still end up hating the show for what it is, because the changes we want to see are not happening. And WWE could care less. They're making their money. They're making their billions. And the last thing they really want to be concerned about is making everyone happy, because you can't. In any kind of job, in any kind of environment, everyone and anyone cannot be happy all the time. And it sucks. Over on SmackDown, we get Becky Lynch to open up the show. And it makes you wonder, again, as I mentioned before, if she'll jump back and forth, as she is the Royal Rumble winner. But only to spice things up a little bit is why I point that out. And this brings out Charlotte Flair and tells everyone, had it not been for her, Becky wouldn't be where she is right now. And in response, Becky sucker punches Flair right in the face. Becky is attacked from behind after she left outside the ring, as Flair re-injures, quote unquote, Becky's bad leg from the Royal Rumble, and they get broken up by officials and agents. They've been real busy this week, these referees and agents from backstage breaking up all these brawls. We then see R-Truth come out and explains how he was never in the Royal Rumble match itself, and because of this, the McMahons have offered him a United States Championship match versus Shinsuke Nakamura that he gets. And we get a very interesting ending here. It's really confusing. There haven't been any reports of anything explaining or pointing out the obvious that just possibly could not have ended the way it was supposed to, but let me explain. Truth rolls up Shinsuke in a small package, and the referee counts 3. At first, it may have been a botched move, as Shinsuke kicked out as the referee counted 3. And even those are close calls to make, but once the 3 count is made, it's the referee's choice. No, I counted 3. I know you counted out just as I'm hitting the mat, as my hand is making contact with the mat. You're kicking out. I counted 3. So Truth wins the match and the championship. Out comes Rusev and challenges Truth in a title match, and he accepts. and Truth retains the title then. Shinsuke returns to the ring and beats down Truth, and to everyone's surprise, Rusev joins in on the beatdown and leaves the champion laid out. So here's my 2 cents worth of opinion. It would not surprise me if we would find out later on that this heel turn, the second in 2 days, by the way, first Elias and now Rusev, was called on the spot to maybe take away the attention from the maybe botched 3 count from the referee. Because it's very strange to see these two team up as soon as after they had their feud that they did just two days ago at the Rumble, or 3 days at that point, at the Royal Rumble, ending there. And then we get to the next segment where Rusev is confronted by Gallows and Anderson, pointing out that what he did and Shinsuke did to R-Truth was uncalled for. And Good Brothers challenged Rusev and Shinsuke to a tag match for next week on SmackDown. Rusev will turn to Nakamura after Nakamura accepted the challenge on their behalf and says this is a one-time team-up and you better not screw me. We were supposed to get a Rey Mysterio match versus Samoa Joe, but instead Zelina Vega comes out and blames Rey for her being barred from ringside last week during his 2 out of 3 falls match with Andrade. But from behind in the ring, Andrade attacks Rey Mysterio and leaves him laid out as the feud continues here. A lot of people are hoping this continues on to WrestleMania and that one man will be most likely Andrade will be the United States champion at least. And the match at Mania would be Rey Mysterio putting up his mask versus Andrade's United States title. So it would be a title versus mask match. And, well, I don't think Mysterio honestly wants to remove his mask anymore as far as being an in-ring competitor in front of so many people. He's done that before and didn't really enjoy it from many shoot interviews that he's conducted throughout the years. And it was Bischoff's call to remove pretty much everyone that was under a mask, eventually remove them. Not all of them, but a lot of the popular ones. Thankfully, La Parka wasn't one of them because he had a great gimmick going on with the chair and being, the chairman, so to speak, of WCW at the time. But good to see that this feud is still ongoing. The Miz and Shane McMahon celebrate their title win from the Royal Rumble as Shane showed their video package leading back all the way to that event that took place from Parts Unknown where he won the Best in the World Cup, nonsense deal, whatever. And how The Miz was trying to convince Shane to team up with him and go after the tag team titles. And thus they did at the Royal Rumble, defeating The Bar. And as a surprise, Shane McMahon would reintroduce to the world Miz's father, or Mr. Miz. Once again, shout outs to Phoenix. And his father, Miz's father that is, comes out, steps into the ring, and just in under a minute cuts a promo on his son saying that he's very proud and loves him. All 3 men embrace as Shane McMahon would announce that coming up next will be a 4 corners tag team elimination match where the winners will face McMiz at the Elimination Chamber for the tag team titles, as we see The Bar, Heavy Machinery making their SmackDown in-ring debut, and The New Day, along with the eventual winners of the 4 corners elimination match, the Usos, as they will get a title match, tag team title match that is, against McMiz at the Elimination Chamber. It should be very interesting here, and I know I say that a lot, but when it comes to mixing it up a little bit, as there are not too many matches that are seen on television, at least, that makes you say, whoa, I've never seen this match before. That's what makes it interesting. You want to see the chemistry. You want to see how they interact with each other inside the ring and how they can try to complement against each other, thus leading to future matches, obviously, to continue the feud, but eventually go back to it much later on, further down the line. Maybe it'll be a singles match by then, or how they'll face off in a Royal Rumble or Survivor Series match, that kind of thing. Either way, I like to see these mix-ups like this. These are actual mix-ups for me, not that nonsense that replaced the draft lottery or whatever you want to call it. But it is what it is. So actually, in between segments of Shane McMahon announcing the 4 corners match and the actual match itself, we got a segment between Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville backstage announcing that they're already in the elimination match for the women's tag team titles without even qualifying. They were just in the match. But at least we got to hear finally the explanation from Mandy Rose as to why she's basically causing Naomi and Jimmy Uso to have a miserable marriage or miserable life, at least from Mandy Rose's point of view. And we see footage from the last ever Tough Enough back in 2015, where Naomi's just talking down on Mandy Rose throughout the shows, throughout many episodes. As well, she wasn't one of the judges, but she was one of the coaches in and out of the series or the season at the time. And that's just tough love, and that's just what it is. That's what they're supposed to do. Maybe Naomi was more vocal than anyone else when it came to those particular segments, but that was expected. You know, as if Taz was a charming teddy bear throughout his, I think, 2 stints with Tough Enough, or Hardcore Holly, you know. But that'll be another story for another day. But point being that that's what these coaches are supposed to be like. You know, it's not ballet, as they always affectionately say about pro wrestling. And you can't always expect to have it your way every time, you know, because you're not working at Burger King. But at least now we have a better explanation and reason why Mandy Rose is doing what she's doing. And this makes it a little bit more interesting now. Daniel Bryan will come out and wanted to explain how he would change the climate of the WWE, as Eric Rowan is officially announced as Daniel Bryan's bodyguard, or heavy guns, if you will. And Bryan pulls a Medusa by throwing the WWE title in the trash can because it was made out of dead cow skin named Daisy. And we got a thank you, Daisy chant. Arizona, don't change. And he introduces a new eco-friendly WWE Championship made out of naturally fallen oak tree and hemp. Besides being a different color, it's the exact same looking championship belt, but it fits the Daniel Bryan character and his real-life persona. This brings out AJ Styles asking if Bryan smoked the prototype to the belt, which I thought was hilarious. Then Randy Orton comes down, and we go to commercial break, and upon returning, all of a sudden we see Jeff Hardy and Mustafa Ali coming down the ring. Then by Samoa Joe on the microphone, who put down and burned Jeff Hardy, I think, in one of the harshest way possible. I mean, the burn of the night definitely goes to Samoa Joe, telling Jeff Hardy to pretend that he's at an AA meeting and to just stand there and shut up while the others speak. And a brawl breaks out between all 5 men because Bryan and Roman will jump out of the ring at this point. Then on the Titantron, we see Triple H, and he announces, to no one's surprise, that all 6 men will participate in the Elimination Chamber match for Daniel Bryan's WWE title. So we'll see Randy Orton, Mustafa Ali, Jeff Hardy, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, and of course champion Daniel Bryan, all going for the WWE title inside of Elimination Chamber match. Definitely interesting. Randy Orton's a veteran of these chamber matches. AJ Styles has had a couple already. I want to say this is Samoa Joe's first Elimination Chamber. I could be wrong. But either way, definitely a great combo here of talented superstars going for one title, and should be good. It should be really good. Of course, again, with possible points in storylines where it may or may not be a giveaway. But the eco-friendly championship belt was just introduced, and more than likely they're going to make some money with the replicas. I doubt they're going to change the design of the title belt anytime soon, especially when it comes time to Bryan dropping the belt to whomever. They'll just reintroduce the old leather one anyway with the same design, because that design is going to be along with the Universal on the other women's titles that look exactly the same, as they'll be around for a very long time. So that's how SmackDown goes off the air. And let's get into other reported news throughout the week. Many have speculated that Charlotte Flair will be added to the planned Becky Lynch Ronda Rousey title bout, especially after an angle seen on SmackDown this week. However, this isn't the case according to Sports Illustrated, as reporter Justin Barrasso says that he's been told that the main event will be a one-on-one affair between Lynch and Rousey at WrestleMania for the Raw Women's title. Of course, it's worth noting that this is in direct contrast to what the Wrestling Observer reported earlier this week. Their sources state that a triple threat match is still planned, and there will be the storyline adding Charlotte Flair to it. And a match so far, the triple threat that is currently being advertised for Fastlane. And that particular sponsoring is supported, or the advertising is supported by this. So eventually we're going to get that triple threat no matter what. I think, I just hope that this being the case, and is yet to be confirmed by WWE, that the triple threat match that is already advertised for Fastlane in local markets, that it does not take away too much steam from the one-on-one match eventually for WrestleMania with Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey. I think it's a huge mistake having these two interact physically, that is, with each other in that manner. Maybe a tag team match would suffice. They've done this before with main eventers for championships. You know, I believe one comes to mind for WrestleMania 23. Both champions from the respective brands teamed up to take on both challengers from respective brands. No, my mistake. It was the complete opposite. John Cena teamed up with Shawn Michaels, and they were opponents for WrestleMania for the WWE title. And Batista and The Undertaker were opponents for the world title, teamed up, and they had a tag team match on Raw. So maybe something like that. You know, mix it up. Have Ronda team up with Becky for Fastlane and take on Charlotte Flair and maybe, I don't know, Sasha or someone. Or maybe Asuka, just to make things a little bit even, as you can have a champion on each team. Just saying. You know, if you didn't hear it anywhere else, you heard it here, folks. Sasha teaming up with, I'll try that again. Ronda Rousey teaming up with Becky Lynch to take on Charlotte Flair and Asuka at Fastlane instead of the triple threat. Why do we need to see a triple threat? Charlotte's is, storyline-wise, Charlotte has had her opportunities, and the last straw, the last attempt was the Royal Rumble. That along with the other 28 women. So unless you want to see Io Shirai or Kairi Sane come up to SmackDown and complain about them not winning, or if it wasn't for them, Becky Lynch wouldn't be what she is today, blah, 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 then no, we don't need to see a triple threat, to be honest, let alone for the title. Keep that out of the equation. Let's focus on what's already planned, what's already expected in the next 2 months. Ronda versus Becky Lynch. And if you still want to keep things interesting, how more interesting can it be to force the two foes to team up together? It's been done before. And it led to many interesting conflicting storylines later on, for the better. And as I mentioned, Dean Ambrose. This is unfortunate. Wade Keller of the Pro Wrestling Torch has reported that Dean Ambrose will be leaving the WWE when his contract expires at the end of April. According to 3 different sources, Ambrose reportedly gave his WWE notice over the weekend. Ambrose directly met with Vince McMahon to break the news, and this was after a new 5-year contract worth a little more than 7 figures a year was offered to Dean Ambrose. It was also noted that Ambrose's status was kept very quiet during Raw, but word spread among the talent after the show. According to one source, Ambrose can do what he wants since he has made good money during his WWE career and doesn't live an expensive lifestyle. Dean's announcement shines a light on the recent portrayal of his character over the course of the last 2 days, as he was dismissively eliminated from the Royal Rumble on Sunday by Aleister Black, and then took a clean pinfall from former Shield member Seth Rollins on Raw this week, as top management and some of Ambrose's closest friends in the company were aware of his soon-to-be exit during the weekend, but there were many on the roster that wasn't aware during the Rumble and Raw itself. So to top all of this off, WWE actually made an official announcement and statement regarding this. And yes, it's true. Dean Ambrose has decided not to renew his contract beyond April of 2019, shortly after WrestleMania, and will no longer be part of the WWE company. But no wishing him well on his future endeavors or anything like that. But it was topped off, the statement that is, of WWE hoping to see Dean Ambrose back in the WWE in the near future. So at least the door will be open for Ambrose. And it's tough to say. I mean, maybe it was after his return, after his injury. I believe it was a bicep or shoulder injury last year that put him on the shelf for a while. came back more bulked up. The Shield was reunited, but unfortunately, again, Faith intervened and was broken up because of Roman Reigns' sickness. And the same night, many still feel that it was done distastefully. That Ambrose turned on that Ambrose turned on Rollins at the end of the night after they won the Raw Tag Team titles, and didn't feel like it was necessary right after Roman Reigns made his announcement. But in the business, it was a good timing for the good heel heat, for the good heel reaction that he got. Then shortly after, most recently, was, I guess, an attempt at a Bane Ambrose or something. He came out that one time with the gas mask, basically getting a flu shot on live television, showing up some of his bare ass on TV, and not seeing in a gas mask anymore, coming out to siren music now, basically, even though it's still its original Lunatic Fringe music, coming out with an entourage, other gas mask wearing individuals. And yeah, I mean, what was the point of it? I mean, gas mask with leather jackets and fur, I don't know, highlights, whatever you want to call it, doesn't scream craziness. And yeah, I asked the question, and I know a lot of you have, what exactly did Ambrose ever do to carry on the moniker of a lunatic fringe? I mean, doesn't act like Nikki Cross lunatic. His in-ring actions, or maybe his in-ring move set, if you will, can be considered somewhat lunatic. But him as an individual, as a character, what exactly has he done? You know? Oh, he burnt his old Shield tie. That was lunatic. No. What exactly was the breaking point for Dean Ambrose? We may never know for a long time, but it's unfortunate because he wasn't the only name announced to be eventually released from WWE, as less than 12 hours later, a matter of fact, I think that same night, between Monday night and Tuesday morning, Hideo Itami, according to Fightful, has requested and was granted his release from the WWE after the former Kenta has been wrestling in the 205 Live brand. Matter of fact, he just had his last match on 205 Live this week in a losing effort to Akira Tozawa. And there will be a 90-day no-compete clause, so don't expect him on the independent circuit scene anytime soon, as the former Kenta joined back in 2014 and has numerous injuries keeping him from being pushed properly. Other times it was the injuries themselves that took him out of high-profile angles and missing out, as many believe, winning the NXT Championship in Japan in the Beast in the East show. But hopefully, along with Ambrose, we can see Kenta or Hideo Itami return sometime soon. And if not in the WWE, because, of course, rumors have started already of these two eventually jumping to AEW. There's more than 90 days between now and their May 25th show, I believe is on. They're Double or Nothing, so that could be a shoo-in because Kenta was immediately released, but again, you got the 90-day clause. Ambrose will not have a 90-day no-compete clause, as he will be, as it was announced, letting his contract expire. And that's it. There will be no signing. At least I don't think there will be. Okay, Dean, you're leaving, but can you please sign this 90-day no-compete clause? If the man still wants to make money, what are you going to do for the next 3 months? And granted, yes, as mentioned in the report, that he saved a lot of money, but still, I mean, you want to do some sort of income. Or if the idea is, as many also pointed out, on Ambrose's case, and maybe even Hideo Itami's case, that this could be another situation like CM Punk, where he is burnt out, and the last thing he wants to think of after leaving pro wrestling is doing more pro wrestling. So let's just wait and see. I say that all the time, man. For these two great talents, I really hope they do land their feet somewhere if they choose to return to pro wrestling anytime soon. If no one else will do it, then I will wish them luck. And whatever it is that they choose to do, in the case of Hideo Itami after his 90 days, or in the case of Ambrose, the day of his expiration date at the end of April, and doing whatever it is that they want to do in life. And in a professional career. Ember Moon is out of action, according to WWE.com, as they posted an exclusive interview during Raw, and it was due to a elbow injury during the Royal Rumble match itself, and unfortunately is going to require immediate surgery, and as of right now, there is no timetable as to when Ember Moon will return. And again, it's hard to point out or pinpoint exactly when the injury occurred, but Ember went backstage and announced that, I'm hurt, and was replaced by Dana Brooke, teaming up with Natalya in a qualifying match for the Women's Tag Team Championship. Would have been interesting, but I honestly don't think Natalya and Ember Moon would have won it anyway, but that's just me. For all we know, the Iconics may win it, but they have yet to be seen in any kind of qualifying matches, but we are expecting at least 3 more matches next week. And as mentioned earlier, an update here on Maria and Mike Kanellis after a report came out claiming that the two requested a release from the WWE. Maria has since denied all these reports, as Maria took part of the Royal Rumble match, and her husband Mike Kanellis was in the box seats with their baby at Chase Field as she made her appearance in the Royal Rumble match itself. So yeah, Maria and Mike are not going anywhere. Maria shut these rumors down almost immediately after I posted my last episode of the JM Report. So good to know that you are still allowed to do such things, where back in the old days, the said talent that's being talked about, whether it's being released or not signing or whatever the case is, it was rare to hear that same talent come out and kill those rumors. But thanks to social media, we can hear and see about that. And Maria jumped on the gun almost immediately and said, no, that they're not true. They're going to stick around, and hoping, especially Mike Kanellis turning his life around in the past year or so, and to want to request his release along with his wife. Yeah, I get it. You're stuck on the 205 Live brand, but at least you're getting exposure. If the idea is to eventually make it to the SmackDown or Raw roster, there's still a possibility. Just a matter of building up the character and getting popular enough, get the fans behind you enough to support. And it all comes down to that, to be honest. You just got to find that niche. You got to find that hook to get the fans in and invest in you. So here's the hoping. Paige was interviewed by Sky Sports ahead of Sunday's Royal Rumble and pretty much talked about what might come next for her in the WWE. As she says, at this point, I don't know. I want to be a manager for somebody. I don't know who, but I'd love to do that. And if that's not the case, then whatever. I just want to be a part of the company. I love this company. It's like my family. Then why not reunite her with Absolution? I get that Paige is the face and Absolution is the heel, but you can turn Paige heel. I mean, she's very good at it. Unfortunately, the timing is not so great because she has a movie coming out. So, matter of fact, which I already bought advance tickets for Fighting With My Family. So, a little bit bad timing to even consider that. I mean, they could have done that before, even when Paige jumped ship and was forced to step down as GM of SmackDown a few months ago, or a couple of months ago. And there was the right opportunity then, because we haven't seen Paige on SmackDown for the longest. We might have seen her backstage here and there, really, but between those appearances, they're so far in between. I'm just saying, because right now she was recently with other members of the cast, including Zelina Vega of Fighting With My Family, over at Sundance Film Festival, promoting the movie. It's been getting a lot of good reviews as of late, and I'm glad to hear that, because I'm really intrigued. Because if you didn't see the original documentary that this movie's based on, I say check that out first to get an idea what to expect, because this is an actual movie, and I think everyone who played the members of Paige's family members, including Paige herself, did a great job. And I'm judging going on that on recently released movie clips and the trailers. I mean, they look great. Of course, Dwayne Johnson, he's all over. He's a producer. It was his idea to do this together, and looks great. So I can't wait to watch it. Fightful and Wrestling Incorporated revealed that Shane Helms has signed with the WWE about joining the Performance Center as a full-time coach, and his job would entail working with NXT talent and grooming them to become WWE superstars, as Helms was seen backstage at the Royal Rumble and Raw this week working as a producer as well. So he's having basically a coaching contract, I guess, or to be one of the head coaches and also as a producer. So great job. I mean, we saw him make a surprise appearance at last year's Royal Rumble and keeping tabs. Wouldn't surprise me if the returning Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy, not that they were directly involved, not that Helms could not have done this himself, but knowing that they're very good, close personal friends, that maybe WWE, someone in WWE got wind of this, and they were doing this off on their own for a while in between companies of WWE and Impact and Ring of Honor and all that. They were still trying to do something in relations to pro wrestling on the independent scene. And Helms has a great mind for pro wrestling, along with Matt Hardy and Jeff. So why not? I'm not saying make Helms the Hurricane part of creative, which would be different and interesting, but good to see that WWE has somewhat kept tabs on these men, and someone else I'll mention here in a little while about joining the WWE again, not as an on-air talent, but a talent nonetheless for a producer and a coach at the Performance Center. So congratulations to Sugar Shane Helms. Jeff Jarrett, as I mentioned earlier, is back in the company, but more specifically signed a deal with the WWE to become a producer himself. Jarrett, who made a surprise appearance at the Royal Rumble match and assumed a segment with Elias, will reportedly also be an on-camera talent as well, according to PW Insider. So here's a similar but different situation with Jeff Jarrett, a producer and also an on-air talent. So who knows if we see more of encounters with Elias moving forward, as I'm pretty sure eventually Jarrett will get his payback on Elias to breaking so far 2 guitars across his back in a span of 1 week. Ariel Helwani tweeted out a picture this week on his Twitter account of Chris Cyborg outside the WWE Performance Center. It's unclear why she was there, but her name has come up in rumors about a potential jump to pro wrestling in the past, as Cyborg's last match in UFC was back in December 28th for UFC 232 in a losing effort against women's featherweight champion Amanda Nunes. And according to Fight was getting a lot of reports out this week. Kudos to them. Sean Ross Sapp says Cyborg offered the following comments regarding her appearance at the Performance Center, saying, "Can you really call it a Royal Rumble if you didn't have Cyborg Nation?" However, Cyborg did not appear at the Royal Rumble, nor were there any reports of her being backstage. So if she wasn't inside the actual Performance Center, maybe she was just passing by and decided to take a selfie or a picture, her standing outside the building, because if you're not expected or don't work there, you're allowed no access whatsoever in the Performance Center. Cody Rhodes will be scheduled to have knee surgery on February 12th, but he won't miss any much ring time, as Dave Meltzer reported in his latest Observer newsletter that Cody will be out of action for 2 to 3 months, but he will be good to go for AEW's Double or Nothing event on May 25th. Cody was removed from competition on Ring of Honor's Global War Tours after hearing a pop in his knee. His original diagnosis was that his MCL, PCL, and ACL were structurally sound, but his meniscus was damaged, later revealing 2 tears. And it was also noteworthy, originally reported that Cody would have had surgery after Wrestle Kingdom 13 and still ended up competing there and at the Ring of Honor's final battle in December. But the good news is that Cody Rhodes is not scheduled to wrestle until Double or Nothing event in Las Vegas. So good timing on this part. Maybe it was by coincidence, but he fulfilled all of his contractual obligations to the other companies. And now his focus is on AEW, obviously, along with the Young Bucks and Brandy. So, again, good timing for Cody. I was going to say Rhodey. For Cody Rhodes here, and we wish him a speedy recovery. John Cena, again, who was not in the Royal Rumble as he, quote-unquote, injured his knee a couple of weeks before then, has landed a new movie role for Netflix. This coming from Hollywood Reporter, as this action comedy will be directed by Jason Bateman. According to John Clark of WrestleZone.com, the WWE is making large attempts to lock down any talent from leaving the company, especially during this time of the year, as AEW just recently launched and is looking for new talent. It was recently reported by the Wrestling Observer that WWE was willing to double the salary of any wrestler who was willing to resign on the spot. A new source is now indicating that this report is indeed true, and on top of the WWE is offering raises up to 50% to non-wrestlers and legends whose deals are up for renewal. It is likely that superstars with contracts expiring in 2019 are in an excellent position financially due to the AEW situation, and the new WWE TV deal with Fox are secured. AJ Styles is the hottest name with the contract expiring soon, and the WWE is expecting to throw AJ whatever he wants in order to keep him tied down to the company for a few more years. So, wow. Again, the timing. And it comes down to money, and WWE is getting a lot of it by the time October runs around with the Fox deal, with SmackDown jumping over to, I believe, Fox TV itself or Fox Sports 1, who knows for sure. Although I'm still leaning on more of the regular Fox network, but we'll see. Also reports of NXT making their TV debut on FS1 as well. So these were all just ideas, as nothing was confirmed in stone as far as which shows will end up where and how they're going to debut exactly, because you still got the 10 o'clock news on the East Coast that's going to be conflicting with their time schedules as well. And it's been like that for many years. So to accommodate WWE like that, to switch up what Fox has been doing for so long, I mean, that itself is going to be one hell of a feat in its own. So speaking of Fox 13 to be exact, out of Memphis, Tennessee, they're reporting that Jerry Lawler's attorney have filed 2 subpoenas to further investigate the death of his son, Brian Christopher. Christopher's death on July 29th of last year was ruled a suicide while he was incarcerated in the Hardeman County Jail. But uncertainties has circled around that ever since the tragedy occurred. Aspects of Christopher's death have either gone unknown or unclear, and Lawler has been persistent about uncovering the truth. Lawler has hired the services of attorney Jeff Rosenbaum earlier this month in an effort to pursue a civil rights claim against Hardeman County and the deputies that were supposed to protect Brian Christopher Lawler. As memory serves me right, when Brian Christopher Lawler was arrested under suspicion of DUI, he was found unconscious and later reported deceased inside of their jail cells. And this was in a brand new, or most recently renovated, Sheriff's County Department building, where coincidentally the security cameras were not working at all. But there were bruises and other marks found on Lawler's body when he was discovered unconscious. And there were other cellmates that names were not released that claimed that there was a scuffle or an incident between Lawler himself and other deputies. And this led many to speculate foul play was involved. And if that's the case, man, I hope Jerry Lawler finds the peace and justice he's looking for, because to be convinced that your son took his own life only to find out that there might be more to the story and someone or something else played a huge part in his life being taken away like this. Well, all I got to say, let justice be served and have mercy on those individual souls. As seen on social media, a fan who sat ringside during the Royal Rumble was forced to remove his AEW shirt, who happened to have another shirt underneath somehow, but he at least was not kicked out. However, it was seen on SmackDown this week, another fan sitting ringside throughout the whole show with an AEW shirt, but cameramans tried to avoid him as best as possible, but was never approached to either remove the shirt or escorted out of the arena, as we've seen before. Or at least, at the very least, tell people to leave on their own accord because of what they're wearing. And I say, what the hell is wrong with you, WWE? How many times have you told us we appreciate and respect people's freedoms of expression and this and that? Isn't that part of it? Okay, but from a business standpoint, you want to say, well, we don't want to represent or give the time of day of other companies out there that are not affiliated with the WWE. Doesn't that go against every single other brand or market or sponsor that isn't under contract or at least in partnership with you? Like I mentioned Golden Crisp earlier, Post or whatever. Okay. I don't see too many Sugar Smack t-shirts out there, which is fine unless you don't give those away. But there's Reebok, there's Nike, there's Under Armour along other sporting jerseys or t-shirts like NBA or NFL. The very same, so at least the NFL for sure, the very same competitors that you go up against and say like, well, football season is on, that's why the Raw ratings are down. Like, oh, bullshit. Okay. One has nothing to do with the other. And two, for a long time expressing, we appreciate the fans' way to be expressive. And that's like, well, that's how this fan wanted to be expressive. And I mentioned this before about going to a Yankee game wearing a Met jersey or vice versa, or whatever the hell I did. And I wasn't kicked out. Might have been lingered at, but I wasn't kicked out, much less even told to remove my shirt. Hell no. Bought and paid for. And who are you or anyone or any other security team or WWE's decision to say otherwise? If I was that guy, I would have put it right back on, or you know what, I'm going to speak to a manager. Why? Why do I need to remove this? Where was it written? Show me where it's written down legally on paper by either the arena that they're in or WWE or whomever. Why should I do such a thing? But because of this video went viral, probably why I didn't want to do this on SmackDown again, because it would have been a little peculiar that you see the fan once and then you don't see him again at all. Well, if you do see him, he's wearing a different shirt. But I kept my eye on him. I was waiting for someone to approach him and say to, remove the shirt or whatever, or in between commercials, and that someone would have done a live tweet or a live Facebook and show the fan being encountered. But it wasn't done this time. Either it went under the radar or I don't think so, because the cameras picked them up several times and they did their best to cut away as soon as possible. But whatever. And I mentioned a few months ago the WWE trademarked when Worlds Collide, or Worlds Collide to be specific, as now we know why. During Royal Rumble weekend, they had access, and the event, WWE Worlds Collide, took place. No spoilers here, but I'll just run down the details about it. But the first round, and as a matter of fact, the entire tournament will be streaming on the WWE Network starting tomorrow, February 2nd. Get the first round, quarterfinals, semifinals, and the finals itself, as the tournament would include talent from the NXT, NXT UK, and 205 Live will face off. And the order of how the tournament brackets were determined was through a battle royal and the eliminations that occurred, and that the winner will receive a bye in the first round. There was a 15-man battle royal, and I got to say, that was a quite interesting concept to set up the brackets, I got to say. So there were also a few dark matches, if you will, but because this was recorded and taped for streaming services, or streaming purposes, I should say, I'm not going to give away those results, just in case they were eventually show them somewhere, whether it's an exclusive YouTube video or something like that. So, but there were a lot. This took place throughout the weekend, so it wasn't like everything took place in one day, which will be nearly impossible. But it was quite a weekend for the Royal Rumble access for those who were attending to get to watch this. But at least now you get to watch what you missed on the network starting tomorrow. So in the first round, we see the winner get a bye and appear in the semifinals. But 205's Drew Gulak takes on Travis Banks 205's Humberto Carrillo takes on NXT UK's Zach Gibson. NXT's Velveteen Dream takes on 205's Tony Nese. NXT's Adam Cole takes on NXT's Shane Thorne. 205's TJP takes on NXT Keith Lee. NXT UK's Mark Andrews takes on NXT's Dominic Duralic. I'm sure I mispronounced and botched that name. I apologize. And in the final match of the first round will be UK's Tyler Bate taking on 205's Cedric Alexander. From what I gather from other reports and fans in attendance, this was an amazing show altogether. And they should do more of this. And maybe even involve main roster talent as well. But I guess they're waiting on feedback on Worlds Collide to maybe want to include maybe an AJ Styles, maybe or someone at least of AJ Styles' caliber. As there are many like Kevin Owens or Sami Zayn whenever they are set to return. I failed to mention there was no appearance by them or announcement by them during the Royal Rumble, but I think they're due, and we'll see how the feedback is all up to the fans. You know, you got to let them know, send them emails of sorts to let them know that, hey, Worlds Collide is a good idea, and you should do more of this. You should do more tournament style where they involve other people from different brands and, you know, go from there. Man, do I need a drink after all this, but this wraps up this episode and this week of the JM Report. Thank you for joining me. Just want to say a quick shout out to everyone up north, especially in the central region of the country, to stay warm and to keep an eye out on the elderly, the senior citizen, your neighbors, your pets, your animals, making sure everyone is staying as warm as possible through this crazy weather up there. As we felt some of the effects, maybe not sub-zero degree temperatures, but it's been pretty cold down here for Floridians in the 30s and 40s. I know it's nothing in compared to what's been going on up north. And I'm not trying to take a jab at anyone because I used to live up in New York, born and raised, Queens, New York, and I know how crazy it can be. But this has been just